Welcome to the show. I said before that it's either you or Lionel who had the first podcast ever. Are you going to fight our colleague for the title?
Well, me and Lionel would lose because I think Adam Curry, the former MTV VJ that created podcasting, he's going to beat us both.
You think Adam was that a podcast? Was that? I thought that was on TV.
No, but he, if you've seen, he's the guy who was one of the guys that actually came in to create podcasting. I mean, it's funny. Mark Cuban came in to do live streaming, and Adam Curry is the guy that kind of ended up putting a podcast, and he did one of the very first ones before everybody.
All right, we tip our hat to Adam Curry. I remember him. I wonder why he didn't stick with it then, because he was good.
Oh, because he had other entrepreneurial ventures. I don't know what else he's done, but remember that guy's like, he's just off and running to wherever he wants. It's not like he's kind of stuck in an office all day or behind a microphone. He's always off doing other things. From the last I remember of hearing him, the occasional Joe Rogan appearance. That's why we always catch him.
I encourage people to go to your website, kingofpodcasts.com. And now you came up with King of Podcasts at KOP on Twitter. They're born out of right here in Stamford, Connecticut, with your love, your passion, your enthusiasm for wrestling, no?
Yeah, 2012 at King of Podcasts. And the thing was is that I went looking for the name, and that was the first thing that even made me start doing podcasting in the first place, because I had to change my now what's called X, but Twitter name, and I was looking for a different name. And then I thought of that, long story short, and then I said, okay, now I need to find a podcast to do. And I tried a couple different things experimentally, and one of the things I heard that I always listened to a lot was wrestling. And I did it, I've been a long time wrestling fan, 40 plus years. And if there was something that I was going to do a podcast on that I could talk for hours on, give me that. And that was, after I did all my experimenting, that was what I decided to work on, and I did wrestling. It's been 787 episodes I've done to date, and over 10 years doing it.
You think, Vince McMahon or maybe his sister, who was part of the Trump administration, they could be listening to the show right now. They live in the neighborhood, so to speak.
Bridgeport? How close is Stamford to Bridgeport? Oh, how close is Stamford to Bridgeport?
Oh, not as the crow flies, as the radio signal flies, not far at all.
Well, then there you go. Yeah, maybe somebody in corporate's over there listening in. And that'd be nice. Like, I'm not one of those fan people that's like, oh, I just kind of praise everything that's going on. I think what the WWE is doing right now, business-wise, content-wise, they're hitting on all cylinders right now. They're doing really well, as good as can be.
Well, did he sell it? I heard he was going to sell it for like $1 billion.
Well, what happened was now the same company that owns UFC, Endeavor, has a 51% stake in the company. And, their second quarter, Endeavor's shares went up to the roof. They're about to close the deal at the end of the year, and they're going to have a new broadcast deal. They're going to make a whole lot of money. And putting UFC and WWE together in the same place, sky's the limit for both of them.
Oh, good for. Listen, a little later, I want to talk with you about your new Podcasters Row series, but I have an important question. Can traditional terrestrial radio, which is my love, and podcasts, can they peacefully coexist? Because I'm on radio. I'm team radio, so to speak. And you've been doing podcasts, and you've been actually telling me to do my own podcast going on now 15 years, I think it is, or 13 years. But my love is with traditional radio and stations like WICC and the others that I'm on. But is there enough room for both? Can they peacefully coexist? Because I know I do radio shows, but then I'm a guest on other people's podcasts, and I hear a lot of the big-name podcasters, such as yourself, appearing on regular radio shows, so that there's not really a competition there, is there? They kind of peacefully coexist, no?
Well, they should coexist. The thing is that radio needs to re-identify what they are. Podcasting, listen, it's just like if you're watching a live sporting event, you want to watch something in real time, that's what radio's for. And getting real-time commentary. If somebody passes away, you want to be at some place, like what social media does sometimes, right? If something's happening in the moment, you want to have radio there for that. For music, it used to be where, if you want to know what the music of the day is, not where you can like find billions of songs being put up on different platforms all the time now. What you could do now is radio would have a DJ, like you, a tastemaker. Somebody would go ahead and, hey, here's a song or a couple of songs you should listen to that we're going to play regularly on the station. That's the role of what radio is supposed to be. To be in podcasting for the first couple of years, they never really understood. They just said, we'll just put our radio show, the morning show, we'll put it up there with the traffic and all the weather checks and all that. And they thought, well, that's how to do a podcast, because they didn't understand what it was. What they have to understand is what you do to create a radio show, what you're doing, Lou, and what to do to create a podcast are two different things. You've learned that because you've done podcasting before, and,
yes.
It's two different bags.
And then I was demonetized and it died.
But the thing was, you remember we talked about, it's like you really didn't. It was weird because it's like you want that in the moment. You want the callers. You want that feedback going on. You want to have that whole setup, which is comfortable.
I love the aspect. I love the aspect of live radio, and I didn't mind doing the podcast. But I also call it verbal masturbation, where you're sitting in a room by yourself talking and recording, and then you post it later. And there isn't. I did adjust, but there is an adjustment. There was an adjustment there. Those first few shows were really kind of tough. But now, George, your love of wrestling, born out of Stamford, Connecticut. Vince McMahon, to his credit, it's a monster company now. Your podcast has just celebrated, what you said, the 10 years of the wrestling podcast.
10 years, yes.
How many other podcasts are you doing?
Can I make one quick point what you said about radio before we go into that? I just want to make the point that radio also keeps you on a clock. And that's something that I think that podcasters need to learn from radio, is that when you're on there and you got your commercials at the 6s, you got 42 minutes or whatever in an hour to go ahead and do the show. I like the fact that you're disciplined doing that, because I think a lot of podcasters should learn from radio that if you're going to talk about something, you only have so much time, you need to make the most of it. I just wanted to make that point.
There is no discipline in podcasts. Podcast guys, even the talented ones, don't know the mechanics of radio. They don't know the discipline of radio, and it really is. Time management is very important. George, you have a lot going on. You have the Wrestling is Real podcast. You have the Broadcasters podcast. You have the Depraved and Debaucherous, which is one of my favorite, and the all-new Podcasters Row, which we'll get into a little bit. But this all was born out of your love of wrestling and Vince McMahon and the WWF. But when is the next WrestleMania? I know that's the Super Bowl of wrestling every year. When is the next WrestleMania? Where is it?
So it's coming up the first week of April, and it's in Philadelphia, Lincoln Financial Field. By the way, for Vince McMahon, he just had spinal surgery a couple weeks ago. He's recovering. So if anybody over there is listening in, we hope he's resting and recovering just fine. But yeah, it's going to be at Lincoln Financial Field. It's they're going to put tickets out, I think, this weekend, and there's no doubt that's going to sell out. Every event they had, SummerSlam they just had at Detroit at the Lions Stadium, Ford Field, 59,000 plus, sellout crowd there. They're selling out every stadium right now. They have some storylines that are about as good as if people listen. They watched back in 20 years ago when there was the real heyday. The Rock, Stone Cold, Steve Austin, right, The Undertaker, all these names coming up. Right now, they have a particular storyline of the Samoan family that goes back to, the head shrinkers or the Samoan SWAT team and all this different family squabble. And they basically just have this tribal faction called the Bloodline, which is the most compelling storyline. I mean, honestly, it's passionate. It's like a male soap opera. That's what wrestling was always meant to be that. And now they have this storyline, which is a couple of things just about everything that's going on in wrestling. And that has elevated everything else in wrestling. Because let me tell you, because of stories like that, we have other wrestling companies out there. And if you wanted to watch on cable or network TV, almost 7 days a week, you could find wrestling on TV somewhere. And it's good because everyone else has stepped up their game, because wrestling is kind of having a little bit of a boom period right now. It's good.
Was it in a bit of a valley? I've never known it to be in a bit of a valley.
Well, there's always been, along with wrestling, television, anything on cable or network TV kept having a decline because of streaming. But, yeah, it's just because the storylines were not as compelling. There were just certain people that, fans wanted to go and see more of, and they didn't get so much of, they were struggling. And, also getting certain people that, Vince McMahon wanted to have on television, or the people underneath him, they thought these are the people we want to have on TV all the time. People either got fed up with and got tired of or exhausted with. But ever since Vince McMahon had that scandal back in July of last year, which, it's all been, I guess, resolved. There's nothing else more to be said about it. But there was a change in who was running the day-to-day operations of the company. This is now just the chairman. But because of the new deal with Endeavor, he still has some say over the overall aspect of operations. But now his son-in-law, Paul Levesque, Triple H, the wrestler, he's running the operation, and he's much more receptive to the audience out there and what they want to see. But they're still looking at the bigger picture, and they're doing things right, about as good as they can be. They're never going to grow the audience watching a network of cable as much as they once had it. But, with social media and everything else, they have people tuning in. They're definitely right. That audience has grown. It's got very vibrant.
I'm happy to see the industry doing well. I wanted to move on to some other pop culture. We got the MTV Music Awards came out. Taylor Swift, top nominee. Are you a Swiftie?
I think she's a smart girl. Listen, not all her music's my bag, but I think she's very smart for what she's done. She keeps putting out albums of her own music that she didn't own. And that was because of the person that she trusted with management, Scooter Braun, screwed her over and sold all her masters. But she was able to make a deal to say, hey, you know what? I can go ahead and re-record my music. Listen, I'm only early 30s. My voice still sounds good, maybe a little bit better than when I recorded the first time. I'll put all the records back out again. And her fans are so lockstep with her, they don't care. They're going to buy everything that she puts out there. So she put out another album of hers, Taylor's version, and every time it has Taylor's version, Swifties are all over the place to buy. And honestly, that tour that she has now sold out, and the ticket prices for that are insane. But she can command
that tour is doing gangbusters, and wherever she goes, they make her honorary mayor. Everywhere from Seattle to Tampa, they've made her honorary mayor. It's incredible. But now, I didn't know that story about her getting screwed. Well, just quickly, so many artists sign over their soul in the beginning because you're so desperate to get exposure. Even the Beatles did it. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Bruce Springsteen. Sure. I think he signed his on the roof of a car. Is hers similar to that? And then they don't even own the rights to all the stuff that made them famous. And
now it's the point where what you're doing now is, if you're a veteran artist, you're selling it on the back end. It's like you get it back, you have your masters. And now publishing companies will spend, billions upon billions, millions upon billions of dollars, or billions of dollars collectively on whichever artist that you want. So if it's, Paul, Neil Young putting this out there, or Joni Mitchell want to put her music out there, all these older artists,
they're more than happy to give up
for the payout.
Right, Bob Dylan, the estate of David Bowie, a whole bunch have just recently sold it on the back end, as you call it. That's a good way to put it. That's.
I think Genesis also put out their music and put it all up for sale. Yeah.
Queen is talking about selling their rights, as you just described, for $1 billion. That's incredible.
They can.
Because they can.
Well, because think about it.
There's an auction. I don't know if it's Sotheby's or Christie's.
No, but think of how much time. How many times do you hear a Queen song in a commercial of anything? Don't Stop Me Now, of any kind of thing there is out there. You've heard that song plenty of times.
And because, Freddie Mercury is an incredible talent. And anytime you have someone with talent such as his, you're going to be dealing with let's just say, unique and eccentric personality. And as good as the movie Bohemian Rhapsody was, and I'm sorry, no disrespect intended, who's the actor who played him? Rami
Malek. He was great.
Rami Malek.
I thought he was fantastic.
He did an incredible job. He deserved that Oscar. But here's the deal. That movie didn't really paint Freddie Mercury in a positive light. When I watched it, I was like, they just didn't make – I don't think he came off looking good.
Well, that personal story was tough. But, you could say the same thing for Elvis. Elvis didn't look,
True.
great when he got flammed by a Colonel Tom Parker or whatever. Like there's that's what makes a story anyway. There's the bad part.
George, I want to get into this whole thing with Bill Maher and the Barbie movie, which, by the way, has raked in more than $1 billion worldwide. But just quickly on the Elvis thing, Elvis, Colonel Tom Parker. Colonel Tom Parker got 50% of everything Elvis made, but all of the expenses were paid out of Elvis's 50%. I mean, he really screwed Elvis over royally. I just wanted to get that in there. Truly, think about all the money Elvis had, and Colonel Tom Parker got 50% of it, but all the expenses came out of Elvis's part. Boy, what a scammer. But the Barbie movie, you went to see the Barbie movie. I have not seen the Barbie movie. It defies it melts my brain to think that from what I've seen in the trailer and whatnot, that people are going to see it to the tune of $1 billion at the global box office. But you said it's actually a pretty good movie, you told me.
I'll put it like this. When you look at the aesthetics and you think about, every single what the Barbie doll, the dream house and the whole set, like to recreate that in real life, to have Margot Robbie play Barbie herself, like she looks the part. The whole scene of the Barbie land looked exactly like you would think it was. Like they also made poke fun at the Barbie doll and just the whole setup of it. I thought all of that was very creative and that was really cool. Now the part that everybody's going to talk about, that Bill Maher's talking about, they talk about the patriarchy. Oh, and Barbie's a fascist symbol and of women and this and that. Like they went ahead and had to put that message out there. And
now wait, Bill Maher talked about the zombie lie, right?
Me.
Didn't he?
Well, that's what Bill Maher said. Yeah. But he defined it, too. He even said it's like, you keep saying a lie, you'll make it try to sound like it's true. So, like, it's that part. He's not wrong with that. The other thing, too, is like, it's not a horrible conversation to have to identify, like, how did Barbie kind of, like, identify what women strive to be and what they should look like. I mean, that doesn't have to be everybody, but, they want to have the movie in here. Mattel allows this movie to happen, and then the director, she's getting a chance to take this blockbuster movie, and she's kind of taking a lot of shots. That's fine, the funny shots at him, but then this other part of Barbie that was like, it's the woke part, and that's the part that people don't really want to. They're like, do we really need to hear that in this movie? It's like, how about it just be fun? Then they took those shots, they took their opportunities. I don't think they overdid it. That's okay to me. I mean, I'm not the Daily Wire. I'm not all these people that were just feigning outrage over this and saying, it's a PG-13 movie. It's not a movie for kids. I wouldn't tell most parents, don't take your kids to see this. And for the most part, there hasn't been. Because the message is in there, let them play with the Barbie doll. Don't make them watch the movie.
Okay, but what Bill Maher said was, and I quote, I was hoping it wouldn't be preachy, man-hating, and a hashtag zombie lie. Alas, it was all three. What is a zombie lie? Something that never was true, but certain people refuse to stop saying it. Tax cuts for the rich, increased revenues, e.g., blah, blah. But he goes on and on. So I don't get what his problem is with this. Was it a man-hating, preachy zombie lie?
Well, part of it was the Ken character. If you know in the trailer, they did show you, without spoiling the movie, that they go into the real world. And when Ken falls along with Barbie to go find the reason they're there, is that Ken finds out that he's much more important than he is to Barbie. So he's this perfect 10. He's this good-looking guy. And then they take this whole thing of like, well, men are the kind of guys, they just like to pop open a beer and they want to treat women like toys and all this kind of thing. Like, that's that whole, this thought process that this is what men are like, which is not even close to the truth. I mean, that's what they want to portray on like a beer commercial. That's basically what they did, was that men were like beer commercials. We're just swallowing around beer and, fooling around with chicks, something like that, which is not the case. And, there's part of the reason where Ken is like, has to come to grips with what happened. So like, after he puts this thought and basically changes Barbie land into all these men taking control and becoming, doing what they did, then Barbie has to come back and put things back the way they were. And Ken is like, looks weak. It's like he has to look at himself internally and see what's wrong with what he was thinking.
So,
and that goes for the other.
It doesn't sound like the most. It doesn't. You know, honestly, it sounds like men are from Mars and women are from Venus type of thing. And then, it kind of has a storyline behind it and works itself out, I guess. No spoiler alert. If you haven't contributed to the $1 billion yet out there in the WICC listening audience, we don't want to take that away from you. But it's, yeah.
Oh,
people
the
like
movies
the
doing
daily.
it themselves.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's the soundtrack, there's the merchandise, there's more dolls getting sold. Like, forget about it. That thing's just cleaning up house.
So Barbie is fashionable again. A friend of mine many years ago, when her daughter was young, told me that her kid didn't like Barbie dolls. I actually have a Harley Davidson Barbie doll. I do. Someone bought that for me, and I still have it. She's dressed in black leather. She's all hot. Harley Davidson Barbie. I do. I still have it in the original box.
That's
now,
a
you mentioned
item now. Wow.
So would you describe this as a woke movie?
Well, it's just like I go to movies all the time. I've gone to about 36 new movies this year, and there's always got some level of woke in it. You just get used to it. It's just ingrained into the picture, into the script.
George, isn't that the bad part, that we're getting used to the wokeism?
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, what are you going to do about it? There's not that many Sound of Freedoms out there to go ahead and, make up for it. That's just what they're going to do. And that's Hollywood. That's what they choose.
I told you this.
That's what they're going to do.
I love movies. I love movies, George. Like you, I love movies. But the last movie I went to see before The Sound of Freedom 2 weeks ago was the first Wonder Woman movie, and that's only because I wanted to see Gal Gadot in the costume. That's the only reason I went to see it. Listen,
True.
She's a hot little Israeli, but she is no Linda Carter. Let's just put it that way. Linda Carter was a woman.
You're right.
And Gal Gadot looks like, a hot chick, we'll call her. But Linda Carter, wow, boy, I'll tell you. She got a lot of guys through puberty, if you know what I'm saying, back in the day.
Well, think about it like this. But they also want to change the characters, too. Look, I watched the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Yes, a cartoon. And, if anybody knows what a cartoon is, there's enough people out there that probably know that there was a reporter that was following the turtles when they're, crime fighters. And April was a white woman, with like blonde or red hair and a yellow suit. And they changed the character completely in this version that Seth Rogen produced and directed, or produced anyway. And they changed the whole look of it. And even that, remake the movie just to create this different scenario for the audience out there. A little bit of woke on something they already had before. Nothing was wrong with it.
Who is your turtle? Are you Donatello, Leonardo? Who are you?
Well, I think it's Leonardo. It's the one that's the leader. That'd be the one, I guess, that it would be.
No, I mean, who is your favorite turtle?
I like pizza, so I'm with them on that.
Who's your favorite? Who's your favorite turtle?
No, I don't have a favorite. I just agree with them on pizza. I agree with them on having pizza. I think that's a good food of choice.
I just agree with them on pizza. I like that.
Because I was much more with the rat and also with the villain in that. I forget his name now. But yeah, that's what I'm more into. So,
hey, just quickly, we got about a minute before we got to break for traffic again, and then I want to talk about Podcasters Row. Indiana Jones. You said it was good, but then it gets woke after a while.
The first 30 minutes, they do that. Regenerating. Indiana Jones looks young, looks like out of Raiders of the Lost Ark. They do a whole scene on a train. That's the best part of the movie. After that, I probably wouldn't watch the rest of it again because they have his the female character, right? There's now basically Indiana Jones. She can do everything that he used to do, and he looks like an old man, fossil, and just can't move around anymore. But she's the hero, saves everybody from everything. And then they do again this supernatural. Let's go. They like to do with the aliens and Crystal Skull. They go back into time and all this. They just go into this other area that I don't even understand.
You know what it was? I could sum it up. In 2 words: money grab. It's a money grab. That's what you're describing.
And
George,
we'll
take a quick, just quickly, George, before we get to Podcasters Row, you did a podcast a couple of weeks ago on the writer's strike. This is something that affects everybody because everybody loves, TV, movies, and entertainment. The Writers Guild's still on strike. When they go to your website, they can find that episode there, I'm sure, somewhere. What's the latest on the writers' strike?
So if you go to Broadcasters Podcast on the website, I've done episodes and we talked about it regularly for the last few months. right now, the Writers Guild and the actors, by the way, the actors also on strike, but the writers, at last check this past weekend, they met up with the Alliance of Motion Picture TV Producers. Nothing moved. Nothing happened. But at least they came to the table, but they're not ready to start negotiating for real. And so with that, now you got radio. The television now is going to have a thing where, shows like Yellowstone are now going to be on CBS this fall because they have that or more reality shows, or like on, streamers like Netflix and Amazon Prime, they're going to have more international shows because they're going to have to go to somewhere else to put something on TV to fill the content that people are going to want to watch that's new.
Are the directors still on strike, or did the directors join them? I remember reading something a few months back.
Well, the directors are still working on things right now where they more or less have a deal in place. They're signed because they didn't have to deal with AI or residuals of streaming as much. But that was because that's the deal that AMPTP could do first. Then they'll go to the writers. Then they'll go to the actors. But the truth is the writers and the actors, they have to get their deals done at the same time because there's not going to be one of those that's going to get a deal done and the other hasn't had theirs yet. So they're waiting to get everybody
to the table. The fact that they came to the table is a good sign, even though that no one budged. Because
they have to. I mean, first of all, the writers and the actors, they're having to worry about their livelihoods. There's all this money being pumped in to help prop them up, even just to make sure they got food on the table. And then on top of that, there's all these different events and things that people want to be able to do. People want to still be able to work. And there's all these agreements being made, these waivers that, okay, there's a project that's an independent film. Yeah, you can work on this. We'll give you permission to do this and that. So people are still trying to find work anyway. But with the union being down like this, Hollywood shut down. They can't do anything. And they can't keep it like this.
Do you think people are missing it or not because it's summertime? Or it doesn't seem to be any buzz about it. And I'm thinking that has to do with the summer.
You're not going to feel it until the fall. You won't feel it until next month. When all those new shows are supposed to be coming back and what they're going to put on TV, you're going to notice a difference. And then when you're on streaming, you're going to be like, what's all this stuff that's new? There's nothing new on here. Like, why am I paying, $10, $12 for all these different streaming platforms? I'll just cut them off. And I think sports will do really good because you'll have that. That's not going away. That's
going to be your alternative. And again, like radio, the live aspect of it. But I do want to talk about your Podcasters Row, which is a new series, and it showcases podcasters talking about various fields and topics about why they do their podcasts and what they're all about. It's a fascinating concept, Podcasters Row. And again, if you go to King of Podcasts, there's more there on it. But, George, I have to ask, we terrestrial radio folks are having podcasters on, such as yourself. Are you podcasters going to return the favor and have radio folks on the podcasts?
Well, Lou, I've offered to have you on. But it's as if we have to be careful because, you're still in the radio business. And, I'm out of it for a long time. I still respect and love the medium. But, we know people that know people, and I would never want to go and put anybody in a position to talk negatively about the radio business because we also want to work in radio anyway. So there's still something we can talk about.
That's a good way to put it. Okay, so Podcasters Row, have you recorded any of these yet? Are there any new episodes out?
Yes, I did 2 episodes on Monday, and I just put them up immediately after that. So there was one guy that was, the guy's very much financial. He does a show called Work From Home Show. And he's had on people like Jimmy Pirro, Dr. Robert Malone, a lot of political types that have been on that show after initially talking about all these different ways of working from home and then just expanded the show. And then another lady that talks about feeling is healing, really about, parents communicating with their children, therapy, being able to go ahead and communicate together if there's any kind of abuse that a child's gone through and all the ways to handle it. And just what she's done with children's books, because she's an author of various children's books and all these different things, and just a podcast was just another place that she can go to get her message out. And there's so many different subjects and topics. There's tens of thousands of podcasts. The thing is, I just put a call out for it, and I already got more than a dozen people that wanted to be on the show because people want to go. It's a community. We should have the community that connects together. And on top of that, there's a lot of podcasts I never listened to before. I would want a show like this so I could have an idea of, am I going to like the host? Like, am I going to like Lou Pate if I listen to a show? Well, let me bring you on the show, and you can talk to me, and I'll get to say, "Oh, this guy might have a good show." I wonder.
So you can kind of see, you can kind of get the hosts out of character, so to speak. But here, one thing, but I need to back up. Just because you have on terrestrial radio people doesn't mean they're going to talk bad about the industry. I mean, people can share their experiences coming up, the victories, the disappointments, the things. I could talk forever about filling in on literally dozens and dozens of local stations as well as national shows for Westwood One and Fox News. I've got a lot to share. Aside from talking negatively,
we've had our conversations
I honestly don't have
air.
anything negative to say about the industry.
Oh no, you're right. It's just that my whole thing is always going to be about that there are some people that own radio stations, that own a lot of radio stations, that I wish could handle things better, and they have all this power and all this ability. I just wish they did a better job. That's all I'm saying.
I got you, but I like is Podcasters Row? Is that named after like the Yankees, 1927 Yankees, Murderers Row?
Well, no,
I'm thinking that's what I thought of, because you had Murderers Row in the 1927 Yankees was like the best of the best, and now you're having Podcasters Row, and you're having on all these top podcasters. So I thought that might be a takeoff on Murderers Row.
No, honestly, you know how you always have like at the sporting events, like the Super Bowl, there's Radio Row, and all these sports stations are all lined up like a cattle call. But the thing is, they do that at conferences. If a podcast wants to be at a conference for whatever there is, they put you now at a Podcaster's Row. And I'm like, well, I'm just doing the same thing, but I'm not talking to these other people. I'm talking to podcasters like it's a Podcaster's Row. Bring them on.
Have on radio people,
come through
George.
Podcasters Row.
Have we radio people on? We need to peacefully coexist. Hey, but George Hermida, King of Podcasts, I got to let you go, but check him out, folks. KingofPodcasts.com, on Twitter, at King of Podcasts. George Hermida, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Hey, I'll bring them on. If you want to reach through, I'll bring radio people on. I promise.
Okay. All right. And again, King of Podcasts, George Hermida, great guy. You will enjoy his stuff.